Masha had always said that the quietest people in any room were usually the ones who had seen the most. She believed this the way she believed in small consistent things, the importance of arriving on time, the value of listening fully, the particular honesty of children and old dogs. She had learned it not from a book but from watching her father, who had been a very quiet man and who had, it turned out, carried an entire world inside that silence. She thought about her father on the morning it happened, though she did not know yet that it was going to happen. She was simply sitting in her usual corner of Café Pervy, the small place on Arbat Street where she brought Timur every Saturday morning because they had good porridge and the windows were big and Timur liked to watch the pigeons on the ledge outside while he ate. Timur was 5. He had his father's dark eyes and his mother's stubborn mouth, and he was, in Masha's entirely unbiased opinion, the best person she had ever met. He asked good questions. He shared without being asked. He said sorry and meant it. She did not know how she had produced someone so genuinely good, and she tried not to examine it too carefully in case she somehow undid it. She was not Timur's mother. She was his aunt, his father's sister, and she had been bringing him here every Saturday for 8 months now, since her brother Dmitri had started bringing him, and she had simply continued the habit after Dmitri could no longer come himself. Dmitri was the reason she thought about quiet people. He was sitting 3 tables away. She had not recognized him at first. He had his back to her, facing the window, and he was wearing ordinary clothes, a gray jacket, dark trousers, plain boots, the kind of clothes that are selected specifically to attract no attention. His hair was shorter than she remembered. He was drinking coffee and reading something on his phone, and he looked entirely unremarkable, which she knew from experience was something he had worked very hard to achieve. Timur had not seen him yet. He was absorbed in the pigeons. Masha sat very still and watched her brother and felt something complicated move through her, relief and worry arriving at exactly the same moment, the way they always did where Dmitri was concerned. She did not know what he did. Not precisely. She knew the shape of it, the long absences, the careful vagueness when she asked direct questions, the way he moved through spaces like someone who had made a detailed study of every exit. She knew he had served, that much was certain, and that the service had continued in some form after the formal period ended, and that it had taken him places and required things of him that he would not describe, and she had learned not to ask. What she knew for certain was that he was a good father. The best she had seen, in fact, better than men who were present every day, because when Dmitri was with Timur he was entirely with him, no distraction, no performance, simply a man and his son existing together with complete attention. Timur adored him with the calm certainty of a child who has never had reason to doubt. She was about to stand and go to him when the other table became loud. There were 4 of them, men in their mid-30s, the kind of loud that comes not from happiness but from the particular confidence of people who have never been seriously inconvenienced by life. They were dressed well. They had ordered a great deal. They had been talking at a volume that filled the cafe since they arrived, but Masha had tuned them out the way you tune out traffic, automatically and without effort. What changed was when one of them looked toward Dmitri's table and said something to the others. She could not hear the exact words, but she heard the tone, and she saw 2 of them glance over and smile in the way that is not friendly. Then one of them, the loudest, called across the cafe. He said something about the food getting cold. He said it in the voice people use when they want to sound like they are joking but they do not actually intend it as a joke. He said something about a man eating alone on a Saturday, and whether he had nowhere better to be, and whether his wife had finally made the sensible decision. His friends laughed. The cafe went slightly quieter in that particular way cafes do when something uncomfortable is happening and everyone is pretending not to notice. Dmitri did not look up from his phone. The man spoke again. Louder this time. He asked if the gentleman at the window was perhaps hard of hearing, or simply had no response worth making. More laughter. A woman at a nearby table looked down at her cup. The young man behind the counter suddenly became very interested in the coffee machine. Timur looked up from the pigeons. He looked at his father's back. Then he looked at Masha with a question in his eyes that she did not know how to answer simply. Dmitri set his phone face down on the table. He did it slowly, without any visible change in his posture or expression. He set the phone down and he picked up his coffee cup and he drank from it with the complete unhurried calm of someone who was managing something internally and doing it so well that no one watching could identify exactly what it was. The loud man said, "Oh good, he is alive." His friends were still laughing. And then Dmitri stood up. He did not stand up the way people stand up when they are angry. There was no scraping of the chair, no tightening of the jaw, no performative squaring of the shoulders. He simply rose from the seated position to the standing one with a kind of fluid economy that was almost architectural, as if his body had been designed specifically for the transition from stillness to motion and had practiced it 10,000 times. He turned to face the table of four. He looked at them with an expression that Masha recognized and that she knew they did not. It was not anger. It was something much quieter than anger and therefore much more serious. It was the expression of a man who had assessed a situation completely and was now simply deciding what to do about it, without drama, without ego, without any of the performance that normally attends confrontation between men. The loud man stopped smiling. Not because of anything Dmitri had said. He had not said anything. He stopped smiling because something in the quality of Dmitri's attention was unlike anything he had encountered before, the way you might stop smiling if a door you expected to be hollow turned out to be solid steel. The cafe was very quiet now. Dmitri walked toward their table. He walked the way he moved through every space, with that particular economy, each step placed rather than taken, his hands loose at his sides, his eyes steady and entirely without hostility, which somehow made it worse. He stopped at a comfortable distance and looked at the loud man and said, in a voice that was low and completely even, "My son is sitting 3 tables from you. He is 5 years old. And he is watching." That was all he said. The loud man opened his mouth and then closed it. One of his friends looked at the table. Another picked up his coffee cup with slightly too much focus. Dmitri waited for one breath. Then 2. Then he turned, walked back to his table, sat down, picked his phone back up, and returned to reading. The 4 men did not speak loudly again. 2 of them left shortly after. The remaining 2 sat quietly and asked for their bill before they had finished eating. Timur watched his father sit back down. Then he turned back to the pigeons on the ledge and said, in his serious 5-year-old voice, "Papa, that one has a hurt foot." Dmitri looked at the pigeon. He said, "I see that. He will manage. Sometimes the ones who are hurt are the toughest ones." Timur considered this. He said, "Like you?" Dmitri looked at his son for a long moment. Then he said, something like that. "Come here." Timur climbed from his chair into his father's lap and pointed at the pigeon, and they sat together in the big window with the morning light on them, and Masha watched from 3 tables away and did not go to them immediately because the moment was complete without her and she understood that some things should not be interrupted. She thought about what her father used to say. That the measure of a man was not what he did when people were watching and approving. It was what he chose not to do when he easily could have, and when no one would have blamed him if he had. She thought that Dmitri had always understood that. She thought he had probably learned it the hard way, in places she would never see, in circumstances she would never fully know. She thought that this was perhaps why he moved through the world the way he did, not as someone with something to prove, but as someone who had already answered the question and simply lived inside the answer. She ordered another tea. Outside the window, the pigeon with the hurt foot hopped along the ledge, navigating with a small and determined grace. Timur watched it the whole time and did not look away.